All right, hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another FNAF stream. And unrelated to FNAF for a second, as you can see, I am wearing an Indiana University sweatshirt because the Indiana Hoosiers just played in the semifinal game, and now they are about to play in the national championship. And the reason why I'm playing the Indiana sweatshirt is because my brother goes there and he's a freshman, which I feel very envious about, very jealous about, because if you factor in all my siblings, I got the short end of the stick when it comes to college and sports and athletics, like dominance. Like, my brother, once again, freshman year, the team is about to play in the national championship, and it just so happens to be the winningest season Indiana has ever had. So great. And my sister, who went to Michigan, they won a national championship in like her sophomore, junior year. Meanwhile, I went to Missouri. We didn't win a national championship. We didn't get close to win a national championship. We didn't get close to going to a conference championship. Nothing. So I got the short end of the stick when it comes to college athletics and dominance, like championships and notoriety. So I feel a little salty, I feel a little envious, but no, it's great. I mean, I guess that means I'm now part Indiana Hoosier fan now, so it's great. But unrelated, back to the topic of the video. As you can see, this is another FNAF video. This should be a good one because it's about the clickbait Yellow Boy, Golden Freddy / Cassidy. So this video should be very, very interesting. Well, I say that, but then again, I feel like all FNAF videos and FNAF theories are interesting because they're all interesting in their own way, because FNAF theories, I think, are very interesting. They're very fun to react to and listen to and hear people's thoughts about it. That's why we've done these FNAF theory reactions the last like 2 years. And I'm going to keep doing them because I enjoy them. I think they're fun and everything. It helps me keep up to date with what's going on in FNAF, but also keeps you up to date as well. So then you also can chime in and share your thoughts, reactions, whether you agree with what I say or I'm a big dumb idiot because I didn't read this book and I am totally naive, I'm totally dumb, and this important detail in one of the books I forgot to mention, and there's such a big detail, and everything I said in the last hour of my stream is now completely irrelevant, completely negated, because I forgot this one detail in the books. So thanks for that, by the way. But here we go. Let's hear another video about the yellow YouTube clickbait Yellow Boy, Golden Freddy / Cassidy. So this should be very interesting, and I love it.
We, as FNAF theorists and fans, make a lot of theories and speculation about Cassidy as a character. But for anyone not in the know or needs a refresher, that's kind of a who character? Like, what do you mean one of the most important characters in the lore of the franchise is never directly mentioned a single time in any of the games? Well, it's FNAF, so it's to be expected. But I thought it would be helpful.
Any of the games. The closest we got is FNAF 6 and the Lore Keeper ending, where you play the mini games of Midnight Motorist, Fruity Maze, and the Puppet minigame. If you could get all those 3 minigames, you beat them to completion where they break, and then you salvage all the animatronics, you play through the game normally, you get the Lore Keeper ending, and it's a hilltop area with 6 gravestones. It has the missing children's incident victims of Gabriel as Freddy, Fritz as Foxy, Jeremy as Bonnie, Susie as Chica. Up in the back corner, it's a very small pixel, but one in the very back is Charlotte Charlie, which is the puppet, which we got a lot of information about in the FNAF 2 movie. And then there's also another gravesite that is behind some grass, which is related to Cassidy, Golden Freddy. And we got the name Cassidy from the FNAF security logbook. So that's the first time we got the name Cassidy in this game series. The second time, I would say even more explicit, is in Custom Night. They are referred to as the one you should not have killed. And it's very rare, but on the very few times, you'll get a weird face picture as a jump scare in Ultimate Custom Night, which is very bizarre of how rare you get that scene, considering how often you die in Custom Night, because it's very, 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 very difficult. Even then, no matter how often you die in Custom Night, it's still like a 0.1% chance you see this face with like blue eyes and like curly black hair, which is Cassidy. They are seen as the vengeful spirit, the one you should not have killed. Cassidy is the one keeping William Afton down there in Custom Night in their hell, in their purgatory, because they're being punished for, once again, killing the one you should not have killed.
Helpful.
Got all that? Cool. Also, another one, they are one of the spirits in Golden Freddy. Because that doesn't make it confusing. Got all that? Cool.
To everyone, well-versed and just starting out, to make a video exactly like this one. Here's everything we know about Cassidy, why many people think they're the one behind Ultimate Custom Night, and why they might be the vengeful spirit. Slices, put on your aprons and let's bake ourselves a video. In June 2018, Scott Cawthon released Ultimate Custom Night as a sort of final thank you for the franchise and fandom around it. Obviously, this wasn't a final goodbye, because Help Wanted came out not even a full year later, because, you know, this is the franchise with 7 final chapters in it, but
Is it fair to say FNAF 1 is the final chapter? I don't think so. I don't think it's a final chapter in terms of a final chapter. But I would say, let's just say alternate universe. If FNAF 1 did not spawn this big conglomerate series of 9, 10 games, 30 books, about to be a third movie, that is set to come out in 2028. So can't wait for that. Let's just say Five Nights at Freddy's 1 was a one-off show. They made the game, released it to the public, and then that was it. That would have been interesting. And I feel like that's a very interesting butterfly effect, alternate reality, where it's like, damn, imagine that's what happened, where back in the FNAF 1 days, there was no mimics or glitch trap viruses or Fazgoo or Bonnie Guppies or VR ARs or robot purple people, body transfer possession, any of that. It was just employee lures kids to a back room in an undetermined animatronic suit, lures 5 kids to a back room, kills them, and bodies are never found again. That was it. That was the mystery. That was the story. Crazy. But in reality, FNAF 4 was seen as the ending to the original story for Games 1 story. FNAF 6 could have also seen as an ending, especially with the iconic Henry speech, where they're burning everything down and everything. So that could be seen as an ending. But then, of course, Help Wanted had to come out and be a new chapter and, like, reboot the series.
Before Ultimate Custom Night was out too long, people figured out that this was a diegetic game. It was something that was happening in-universe. We, the player, are William Afton, going through an eternal punishment set up by some ethereal force, basically being forced to relive all of our worst memories thrown at us at all time.
I brought this up in the intro, but Cassidy, the vengeful spirit, we play as William Afton. We're being banished to hell to pay for our sins of killing the one you should not have killed. I brought that up earlier, but I just want to repeat that again in case you missed it.
And while that was fairly apparent, the what of this game was never really heavily debated. It's the why, the how, those aspects that really hold arguments to this day in FNAF discourse. We know for a near fact that William Afton is being tortured for all of time in this Ultimate Custom Night. But the question is, who is doing this to him? Why are they doing it to him? And how are they doing it to him? Well, obviously plenty of people want to torture William Afton, but why this particular way? As far as the who, I really only know Baba O'Reilly, but the game itself does point a few directions as to who is doing this. We hear mention from a few death quotes about a quote, one you should not have killed, but one in particular is incredibly noteworthy. From Nightmare Freddy, I am remade, but not by you, by the one you should not have killed. So whoever this one is the one creating this purgatory. Pair that with other death quotes where we can hear a whispering voice behind an animatronic voice, this incredibly rare image of a face that can appear in the vent, and this audition listing for a quote vengeful spirit, and we have our mystery creator. Whoever this vengeful spirit is, they are both childlike, the one creating Ultimate Custom Night, and has a particular grudge against William Afton. But the final nail on the coffin for their identity is the ending cutscene of the game. Going back to some of those whispered death quotes, many of them focus on torturing William Afton forever, for the rest of time, and the final cutscene you can unlock in Ultimate Custom Night.
For those who may not be aware, because how old is Ultimate Custom Night? Because FNAF 6 came out in like 2017. So, what? Custom Night's like came out like 2018, 2019? Jeez. So like Custom Night's like what? Like 7, 8 years old? God damn, I'm just realizing how old Custom Night is. My God. But anyways, the lines of I will keep you here, I will never let you rest, I'll never let you leave. Recap, those are lines from the Miracle Melodies. If you died to Miracle Melodies, 99% of the time they would say, you know, normal death lines and you wouldn't think too much of it. Right. But then on very rare occasions, you will hear lines like that from the Miracle Melodies in a very whispery, ASMR-like voice where you say, like, I will keep you here, I'll never let you rest. Basically, and not only that, you'll hear those lines, but you also will hear those lines of I will keep you here, I'll never let you rest, whisper in the background, kind of like how the voice in the background is telling what these Miracle Melodies to say, basically implying that Cassidy the Vengeful Spirit is like controlling and mimic the Miracle Melodies into saying what they want, because once again, Cassidy the Vengeful Spirit is controlling this whole purgatory, if you will.
It is a twitching Golden Freddy, slowly fading back into the distance, as if going on for the rest of time. So many people assume this vengeful spirit is the spirit inside of the Golden Freddy suit, who we have very little leads on. Either it's a child we have no information about, or it's the Crying Child. And everything we know about the Crying Child's characterization doesn't really scream vengeful spirit. It kind of just screams piss baby, or just screams in general. So the stall here is that it's likely a child possessing Golden Freddy and torturing William Afton for the rest of time. But can we get any more specific on who that spirit is? Well, when the game information begins to lack, that's when we pull on other media, like the books. One book in particular, the security logbook.
Sorry, this video is not Spawn.
Well-known non-game pieces of the FNAF franchise. I'd argue people know about this book more than they do about some of the actual books, because this is more of a workbook. This is an activity book. This isn't like a short story or a novel or anything. But somehow,
I mean, when you have drops like the name Cassidy being revealed in the security logbook, it's no wonder that the security logbook gets mentioned with the utmost importance, more than, let's just say, some of the, Tales of Pizza Pletz books like Didophobia. Right.
This is so chock full of lore, it's nuts. It's so filled with lore that it's gaslit us into assuming every piece of merchandise has lore in it. Like, when the coloring book came out, people were worried there'd be lore. Because if this had it, why not that? Very quickly after the security logbook released, people realized there were 3 voices in the book if you look at the text. There's the previous owner who writes in a red ink, there's faded text that can sometimes appear on the pages, and there's changed text, which appears very rarely near the end. The person writing in red ink's name is Mike, and judging from that and his opinions on the franchise, it's pretty safe to assume that Mike is Michael Afton. And you know, he knows about Nightmare Fredbear. How many people in the franchise know about that? The person changing text in the book is often thought to be the crying child. After all, the things he says are very similar to the things we know the crying child has said. Lines like, "I'm scared, I can't see," he's acting like a little crybaby, so probably the crying child. So the big question then was, who is the faded text? Mind you, this book came out in 2017, a few weeks after FNAF 6. So at this point, you know, we thought we had the entire franchise under our belt, and nobody seemed to line up with this faded text. Well, throughout the entire book, the faded text kept repeating the words, "my name." And using that and some changed page numbers, eventually the community had a set of paired numbers, and charting them on the word search gave us the name Cassidy. So if we assume the faded text, the one saying "my name," is named Cassidy, the question then becomes, who the hell is Cassidy? This name isn't mentioned in any of the games. Well, whoever they are, they seem to be trying to help the crying child remember something. They seem to be dead by the fact that they put "my name" on a tombstone. It is ultimately up in the air as to who Cassidy might be, but the fact that this released a few weeks after FNAF 6, a game where we have a tombstone with a hidden name on it next to all the other MCI victims, and the fact that it came out a few months before UCN, many people, myself included, assume Cassidy to be the 5th missing child incident victim, the one inside of the Golden Freddy suit. It's
Also, if I'm not mistaken, way back in the OG FNAF 1, FNAF 2 days, when the spooky ghost Golden Freddy would appear in your office and your game would literally crash in a jump scare. If I'm not mistaken, "my name" text would appear in the corner of the screen, also linking Golden Freddy to "my name" as well, if I'm not mistaken. So I just want to add that little detail, so a little spice in there as well.
also thematically relevant, the fact that in life the crying child was comforted by his Fredbear plushie, and in death the spirit of Fredbear is still trying to comfort him. Not to mention that since this book, the name Cassidy has only appeared in incredibly lore-relevant locations. It was changed very quickly after it was discovered, but it's still worth noting that originally, the sprite of the princess in Princess Quest was named Cassidy. It's also incredibly noteworthy that when Scott was listing the possible scripts for the FNAF 1 movie, one of them was codenamed Cassidy, and the description of that script was that it was way too lore-dense.
The Cassidy screenplay, basic setup, diving deep, this screenplay packed in a lot of lore. I had to. Following the story of Cassidy, problems, spanning multiple time periods, time travel ball pits, following multiple characters, and featuring lore. Okay, I'm going to stop doing that. From multiple games, this was pretty saturated to a fault. It may have been satisfying to the most hardcore fans, but it left the majority of people confused and lost. Maybe this was the most accurate screenplay. Ultimately, more of a visual encyclopedia than a movie. This wasn't satisfying even to me out. Okay. Question, Scott. Because background, this is a Reddit post that Scott made of like, oh, here's like 6 or 7 screenplay scripts that, you know, I'm working on as pitches for the FNAF 1 movie. This is still when the FNAF movie was even up in the air, if it was even being made, because recap, the FNAF 1 movie was first teased and announced back in 2015 when FNAF 3 came out. And think about how long, many years that took from 2015 FNAF 3 to finally get the first movie in 2024. All that time and window. So this Reddit post was in between that context. There was like a funny one where it was like, oh, animatronics take Manhattan. So that was a funny one that Scott mentioned. But here's a question. Here's a thought I have. This whole idea of the screenplay dives deep and packed with lore following the story of a character. Features lore from multiple games. And it'll be satisfying to the most hardcore fans, but it would have left the majority of people confused. Here's my question. Here's my counterpoint. Is that not the FNAF 2 movie? But instead of it being the Cassidy screenplay, it's another name that starts with C. Charlotte. Right? The FNAF 2 movie is packed with lore. It follows the story of Charlotte, a kid who tried to protect other kids, was eventually murdered by William Afton. Then their body is linked to the puppet that caused them to be vengeful because they were not there. People were not there, as Henry put it in the FNAF Sid speech. People were not there to hold and comfort Charlotte's dead body like Charlie did to others. And by the way, there are times when I say like that, right there, where I will say Charlotte, one sentence, but then Charlie in that sentence. Disclaimer, by the way, it's the same person. It's FNAF, go figure, but Charlie and Charlotte, they're the same person. The name gets interchangeable, by the way. So, anyways. You have a ton of sister location nods in the FNAF 2 movie. I brought up on my review the Ballora music bots. You outright have a baby animatronic there. You have a company that's linked to a scooping company. That's also the first time we see Michael Afton. I didn't bring this up as well during my review, but the end of the movie being animatronics ripping apart and killing other animatronics is literally how the Twisted Ones ends, which is the second book in the original trilogy of books. Like, it's confusing, it's bizarre, it's complicated, but hardcore fans like us loved the movie because of how much lore, how much story, how many Easter eggs, how many nods to the series there were. But if you just simply went into the FNAF 2 movie like, hey, I enjoyed the first movie, or hey, I enjoy animatronic horror, or hey, I enjoy movies by Blumhouse, you in this movie so confused of how the writing's terrible, the plot points aren't satisfying, things just come out of nowhere and feels like there's no satisfying conclusion. I'm not saying the movie's perfect, but the movie was overstuffed with lore and Easter eggs that satisfy the fans because the movie was made for the fans. So I think it's kind of ironic of how leading up to the first movie, Scott didn't want to do the Cassidy screenplay, of how deep it dove into the lore and how complicated and how confusing it was, just for then the second movie to do it with Charlotte.
And while the really invested fans would have loved it, it's too confusing for the general public. So that's Scott indirectly stating that the name Cassidy is incredibly lore relevant. So I think it's safe to assume that Cassidy is the Golden Freddy spirit and the one speaking in this book. So if they are the Golden Freddy spirit, and this book was released between FNAF 6 and Ultimate Custom Night, I think it's safe to assume that that is the spirit, the one you should not have killed. The vengeful spirit, the one creating Ultimate Custom Night. But even if we have the who, we still don't have the how. How is it that Cassidy is able to reach into the mind of William Afton and torment him with his own memories? Well, that theory isn't mine, but I'll still share it because it's relevant. Fellow theorist Stormister noticed that Scraptrap's design might be purposefully like that, not just shitty in general. After all, he's not just deteriorated and
Is it a hot take to say that this right here may be one of the ugliest and worst animatronic designs the series has ever made? Right? Is that a hot take that this goes in the D or F tier of animatronic designs? Like S tier, you have someone like Withered Bonnie from FNAF 2, right? Or even Foxy from FNAF 2, right? And I would say this is in like F tier. Like, what are we doing here?
FNAF 6. Things have been added to Scraptrap at this point. The theory states that FNAF 3 William Afton was desperately trying to repair the Springtrap suit after the FNAF 3 fire, and to do so he pulled on the only other suit with similar technology, Fredbear. After all, they're the two Springlock suits of Fredbear's Family Diner. But as we know, spirits in Five Nights at Freddy's seem particularly attached to the metal of their animatronics, so taking pieces of Fredbear, which is possessed
Tied to Remnant. That's how they're tied to the metal parts is Remnant.
by Cassidy, and affixing it onto himself could theoretically take parts of Cassidy's spirit and attach it to himself too. It would be in this moment that Cassidy's spirit becomes attached to William Afton, and as we know from the books, it's shown that people who have an aptitude for agony or an intense connection with somebody's mind is able to send that person into a living nightmare that they can't escape from using that person's memories. So whether or not Cassidy is apt with agony, just the connection alone is theoretically enough to trap William Afton in his own mind.
Okay, I don't know if they're gonna get into this, so apologies in advance if what I'm about to say is repeated, and I don't know why you're listening to me then. But going to the books and this whole idea of souls being connected to William Afton, not letting him die. In one of the books, in the Tales of the Pizza Putz, there's a story of how there's a corpse in the hospital bed and nothing will allow them to die. Like they try, pills, lethal injections, suffocating them with the pillow, like nothing will work, right? Doctors or nurses are trying to kill this thing because it doesn't look like a person anymore. Their eyes are fully blackened. They have no nose, no mouth, and everything. It's all a Voldemort in a way. Doctors and nurses have tried everything they can to kill this thing, but for some reason, no matter what they do, no matter what they try, it will not die. It just won't, right? The reason is because there's another soul tied to William Afton that is keeping him alive, no matter how bad he may look and how dire it may look and how he really should be dead because he doesn't resemble a person anymore. There's a spirit tied to William Afton that is keeping him there, keeping him alive, not allowing him to die yet because the spirit is not done with him yet because they want to punish him further. The book goes on to say that spirit is a kid named Andrew who has an alligator mask. Now, I'm not saying alligator is tied to Monty from Security Breach and then later in Secret Amendment. That's not what I'm saying at all. But a kid spirit tied to William Afton, tied to William Afton's soul, not allowing him to die, not allowing him to go in the aftermath life, instead keeping him here in hell, in purgatory, so he can be punished further and further and further. If that doesn't sound like a vengeful spirit, I don't know what is. Right? The book also goes on to say that the reason why Andrew is vengeful is that William Afton killed him when Andrew was alive, but William Afton was more brutal in Andrew's killing than the other kids, the 5 missing kids from the missing children incident. William Afton took his killing way too far, which also links to Cassidy, because we as a community have always believed the reason why Cassidy is the vengeful spirit, why he goes after William Afton so hard and why he's vengeful, why he wants to punish him, is because William Afton was way more brutal and took it way too far in his killing than the other kids. So that's why he's vengeful.
But if that's the how, then we still aren't sure on the why. At least, a better why. Sure, yes, Cassidy was killed by William Afton, but William Afton killed like 20 people. Is there a particular reason why Cassidy is more vengeful than any other victim? I think we have the information to imply this. A few times throughout this franchise, Golden Freddy is depicted adjacent to depictions of drowning. Notably, in FNAF AR, one of his costumes is being chained up and underwater, and most notably, in both Ultimate Custom Night and FNAF World, we walk the Fredbear sprite into a red lake, one of the endings being called the Drowning Ending. Not to mention, in Help Wanted, you can occasionally see Dreadbear exiting the Red Lake. So there are weirdly a lot of instances where Golden Freddy is mentioned around drowning in a red lake. Why could that be? Well, in the first FNAF novel, William Afton directly describes what it's like to die by Springlock, and in it, he mentions that the main reason people die is drowning in their own blood due to the puncture wounds the Springlocks give you. And how apt of an allegory is drowning in a red lake to drowning in your own blood? Pair all of this with the fact that Golden Freddy is a Springlock suit of Fredbear, and I think we've cracked it. Keeping in mind that most of the evidence we've described so far is just straight fact with a little speculation on top. Let's throw all our ingredients into the oven and start heavily speculating on the building blocks we've made. The 5th victim of the missing child incident, Cassidy, was not killed like the previous 4. They were killed and then later stuffed into animatronic suits. But Cassidy was put alive in the chest of the Fredbear Springlock suit. And once trapped inside, the Springlocks were triggered, killing Cassidy in one of the most brutal and agonizing ways that this franchise can think of, drowning them in their own blood. A particularly heinous way to go, one that is uniquely agonizing, and
which is kind of what I brought up earlier of how his death was different and way more brutal than the rest, which caused him to be vengeful.
Has now created an immortal enemy in their spirit. But for now, all Cassidy could do about it was ruminate and brood and threaten anybody who got too close to the Golden Freddy suit. They were trapped in that immovable suit, but eventually William's own desperation made him make his biggest mistake. In seeking out spare parts to repair himself, he found that Fredbear suit, took parts of it, and added it to himself. In doing so, bringing Cassidy's spirit over. All Cassidy had to do was lay in wait for William Afton's weakest moment to fully overtake him, and it wouldn't be too much longer until that opportunity arose, when his old business partner Henry Emily trapped and incinerated him, trying to have everybody move on. But it was in that moment where William Afton's spirit was its weakest, about to move on, that Cassidy struck, entering his mind, using his own memories against him, and giving him that very same torture he gave to others right back to him. They knew moving on was too good for William Afton. He needed to suffer for as long as they could keep him, technically keeping his mind and spirit in our world, but only to suffer for as long as they could manage it. So that's Cassidy. Now, to be clear, I'm not an end-all be-all, and I don't decide what is true and isn't true. I tried to stay mostly factual before the pitch, but obviously you need to make some speculation to talk about anything with Five Nights at Freddy's. This is all still my opinion, but I tried to list all of the relevant evidence we have of Cassidy in this video, so you can make your own decision. Cassidy as the vengeful spirit is not the only theory. Some people think it's the crying child. Some people think it's Andrew, who's a character that's even...
Andrew, nice. Call out.
Less mentioned in the games. Absolutely never. But I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, and if this was helpful.
Nice. But in my opinion, Andrew is a thing in the books where it's like, okay, we're just going to take this character, take all their character ideals, take their personality, and pretty much just transfer all that from the games into book form just to add layers of context, right? Kind of same thing of how I've brought up numerous times of how, you know, you have something like in the Tales of the Pizza Bloods books, something like, you know, a plush trap doll has like ridiculously strong teeth, and they're able to bite through like metal doors and everything. Now, do we see anything like that in the games? Mainly that being FNAF 4. No. But something the book does call out is it moves in the darkness, but it stops in the light. How does Plush Trap operate in the FNAF 4 minigame? Sitting in a hallway next to Plush Trap in a dark hallway, and you shine your flashlight on it to cause it to stop moving. Right? It's pretty much just taking what we've saw from the game into book form, but in just a different way, you know? So that's why I see it. And in my opinion, this sounds maybe like a cop-out, but I'm a firm believer of the two spirit theory when it comes to Golden Freddy. You have Cassidy / Andrew, the vengeful spirit, in there with Golden Freddy, but then you also have the FNAF 4 Crime Child. So you have both spirits in the Golden Freddy suit. Not only have we talked about this entire video of how the vengeful spirit's connected to Golden Freddy, so that adds up. But brief recap, the FNAF 4 Crime Child is tied to Golden Freddy because he carries around a Golden Fredbear plushie that follows him around everywhere and talks to his mind, right? And then he's also, at his birthday, shoved in the mouth of a Golden Freddy Springlock suit, Fredbear, and then the Springlocks chomp down and kill him. Even more, having that connection of the FNAF 4 Crime Child and Golden Freddy, right? So two characters are tied to the Golden Freddy animatronic. And before you say, oh, that's not possible because, you know, how does that make any sense with like multiple spirits being possessed in an animatronic? Well, I got news for you. This series has taught you a lot when it comes to animatronics. Something that happens in the books is multiple people, multiple spirits can be connected to one animatronic conglomeration, right? It happens in the books with the Stitch Wraith of how there's two spirits. One controls the head, arms, is able to see what's going on outside. The other controls the legs, but they're not able to see what's going on. Two spirits in one animatronic. Two, take a look at the Blob, for instance, from Security Breach. How many animatronic heads do we see in the Blob? Right? You have Mangle, you have FNAF 1 Bonnie and Chica, you have an Endo B at the bottom of the Blob. You have Circus Baby, you have the puppet with no tear tracks. That sits off the top of my head. Blob, one conglomeration, right? So there you go there. And two, another way that animatronics come to life in the series is Remnant. You don't need a physical dead kid, a physical dead soul to go on to possess an animatronic suit, right? Like, for instance, someone like Balloon Boy probably doesn't have a dead kid stuffed inside of them, right? Like, that would be bizarre. But Balloon Boy probably does not have a dead kid stuffed in their body, and that's how they're possessed and that's how they're alive and everything, right? But in the books, I can't remember his name. But it's not Edwin, but it's a genius inventor in one of the Pizza Bloods books of how he's able to make these like crazy advanced robot creations. They're able to move on their own just by wood. They're wooden dolls. Wooden dolls immediately connects to you like Balloon Boy, JJ, and the other dolls you see in the sister location bunker. You don't need a dead kid's soul to have possession, right? So that's what the series has taught us. But good video. But let me know what you think on it. Do you agree? Do you disagree? And I'm very curious what you think about the whole Cassidy Golden Freddy theory. Are you in the same boat as me that you think Golden Freddy has two spirits inside of them? It's the FNAF Crime and Cassidy? Am I a big dumb idiot and no, it has to be the vengeful spirit because this reason? Or is it someone completely different and it's not Cassidy or the FNAF Crime Child? Let me know. I'm very curious.